Hello, everyone, and welcome to Something to Talk About Live. My name is Liz Owen. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Director of Communications at pflagnation.al. It's great to have you with us for another episode of our show. I don't want to waste any time because, as always, we have a great conversation with two really, really special guests. So let me bring on our host and my good friend, Jean Marie Navetta.
Liz Owen.
Jean Marie Navetta has been a minute.
I know. I've been with Henkel. You left us unsupervised for a little while. We didn't blow anything up while you were gone.
Nothing is broken. All the buttons are still here.
Not that you have found yet.
I feel like you've maybe left me some Easter eggs that I'm going to discover now that I am back.
Preferably when I'm on vacation.
I would say and by Easter eggs, I mean utter chaos hidden somewhere in the room.
It's what we do for each other, Liz Owen.
And I appreciate that. It keeps me employed at a minimum.
Thank you, Liz.
You're welcome. See you later.
Hey, everybody. My name is Jean Marie Navetta. My pronouns are she and ella, and I'm the Director of Learning and Inclusion at pflagnation.al. Every single week, we get together to talk about something related to LGBTQ equality and inclusion, and this is another one of our important conversations, and I am really, really excited about this one because of our guests today. So just to get you up to speed, if you're interested in reading our article of the week, it's from the AFP, and the title of it was, "In Wyoming, Scene of Infamous Gay Hate Crime is an Unlikely LGBTQ Haven." And if you go to straightforequality.org/discussion series, you can grab the link to that article, as well as some discussion questions if you'd like to have a conversation with your friends or family, or if you're a teacher, you can use it. It is all right up there for you. So the article does acknowledge that it was in Wyoming that Matthew Shepard was murdered in 1998, in October of that year, when he was 21 years old. And it talked about how the town has really, and how the whole state has evolved, and how there have become some very safe spaces for people. But of course, there's always some work to do. So whenever it comes to talking about Matthew Shepard, it is always nice if we can talk to people who actually knew Matthew and have been part of building the legacy that has formed since his passing. And so I am really, really excited to welcome our guests for this week, Judy and Dennis Shepard. So let's bring them on.
Hey, Jean Marie.
Hello, Judy. Hello, Dennis. How are you?
We're good, thanks.
Thank you so much for being here. We always appreciate you. You've been part of our PFLAG family for many, many, many years. And it's nice whenever you could come home. So I'm pretty sure everybody knows who you are. They should. But they may not be familiar with the work of the Matthew Shepard Foundation. So before we get any further into our conversation, can you tell people a little bit about what the foundation does?
Sure. I'll start. We incorporated the foundation in 1998 on Matt's birthday, December 1st, very soon after he passed. Wonderful people like PFLAG parents were sending us money to help pay the hospital bills. So we didn't feel that was appropriate. So we started this foundation initially to help Matt's friends and his peers. It was a couple of years before we were what I call a grown-up foundation with a real board and a real plan and all of that. We had bylaws and we were an official 501c3 right from the beginning, but we really didn't have people working with us. It was just me, pretty much. Later, we developed a board, and then we developed a plan, and we've gone through many things over the past 24 years. But I think our success is our nimbleness. We're very small. We are still only 8.5 people. Actually, this is the largest staff we've had ever. But we've tried many things, but what we've discovered is that we're either too gay or not gay enough, or we're too small, or we're too big, or we don't have the right message, or the message is like too loud or not loud enough, or all kinds of things that just we couldn't find a niche other than our own personal experience and hate crime legislation. So that is where we have been. So when Dennis retired in 2009, we went on the road together. Prior to that, I did a lot of colleges and businesses and employee resource groups and so forth, trying to get things started, lobbied for the hate crime bill. And so we've just sort of morphed into what anybody needs us to be. We can do pretty much anything, but we're just too small to establish a sustainable program. right? We can't do curriculum. Schools don't let you do that, really. So hate crime, we do policy work with state legislatures, but really we're not really defined by our programming. We have a wonderful website called Matthew's Place, which we set up specifically for youth, that contains some things that maybe not everyone's parents would be happy to see, but I wanted a safe place for them to go. And it's with resources and stories and people's personal stories of transition or coming out, and elder gay folks tell their stories, and if they knew then what they knew now. It's really dynamic, and it's getting back off the ground again. I'm really proud of it.
I think it's fantastic. And, you know, one of the things we always say at PFLAG when people say, oh, we're just a small chapter, we're just a small group, we always say it's not small, it's strong. It's very agile. And I think that that is one of the abilities that you have, and especially in the spaces that you've created. So, you know, I've worked in the advocacy space a really long time, and I tend to find that people who have had deeply traumatic experiences typically go in one of two directions. Either they try very, very hard to distance themselves from what happened and kind of move past it, or they completely immerse themselves in the work that they feel needs to be done. And obviously the both of you sort of jumped right into this pretty deeply after Matthew's murder. So maybe, Dennis, we can start with you for this time. What was some of the motivation of taking your story on the road and telling these stories and staying at it for this long?
Well, first thing you have to understand is right after we lost Matt, I went back to Saudi Arabia for 12 more years. So Judy was trapped here by herself. Our other son was in boarding school here in the States. Matt went to boarding school in Switzerland because there are no high schools for Westerners in Saudi Arabia, so they had to go somewhere else in the world. So the idea behind it was that we've been getting requests, letters and cards and just conversations. You need to do something to keep something like this from happening again. And we figured we only had a couple of years. We remember what happened to Ryan White, unfortunately, with his foundation and stuff. After 5 years, it disappeared. And so we figured we just had a short time frame. And so Judy stayed here, my very distinguished.
Go ahead, say it.
I won't say it. But she stayed here to do that. I had to go back to work to pay the bills, and something needed to be done. And so Judy was basically the one here to do it. And she had to figure out what she wanted to do and how she wanted to do it, and what her mission and goals were. And so based on what we had experienced through everything, she kicked it off and got it going. And it's been a success. Unfortunately, it's been successful.
Yeah.
I say that is because unfortunately we're still needed.
Yeah.
And sad to say, we were planning to retire in 2015.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow.
that changed real quick.
Wow, that goes back several years, and here we are pushing 2023, and you're still at this. Judy, prior to what happened to Matthew, could you have ever seen yourself as an activist? Was this even sort of part of the universe that you occupied?
No, I'm such an introvert that would be, no, not ever cross my mind. I tell people, well, they ask if that hadn't happened to Matt, what would you be doing? Would you be doing this work? It's like, well, yeah, I'd be the mom making cookies at PFLAG meetings. I wouldn't be the person at the podium. That's just not who I am. I had to figure out how to tell Matt's story and not be paralyzed by new situations or new people or lots of people or, you know, whatever. So,
or memories of Matt.
Yeah, and memories of Matt. That was really hard. But when Dennis went back to work and Logan went to school, I was like, I have no other obligations, and I need a purpose. I need a reason to get out of bed. I knew I would not survive if I was one of those folks who tries to make it just go away. And I understand not everybody can do this work or wants to do this work or is able for all kinds of reasons.
Yeah.
But I didn't have anything holding me back, and I had a lot of people pushing, actually. So telling me I could make a difference if it was just for a few things. But as Dennis said, we sure didn't think we'd still be here 20 plus years later.
And I tell people she's a 15 on a 10 scale introvert.
She, having met you at least once before, it is a true story.
And her first speaking engagement was the U.S. Senate. How's that for a kicker?
How's that from out of the frying pan and into the fire? I mean, that's kind of intense. So neither one of you sort of had this as part of your plan, and yet here you are much longer than you expected to be. Just one more question, because I do want to talk about what's been happening and how it feels for you to look at it with the history that you have. But my one more question is, what advice would you give to parents who find themselves kind of beginning these advocacy journeys? Because you've certainly had to grapple with a lot along the way. What people say, what they don't say, how they treat you, how the story has unfolded, the different evolution of what this has looked like. Do you have any advice for parents who want to get out there and be openly supportive like you are?
Well, I guess the first thing is, from our experience, you need to be prepared for whatever kind of reaction you're going to get. We lost friends, we lost family members because we chose to do this work. You have to absolutely have in your head that the number one thing you want to do is support your child, and to listen to what they have to say, because they're your teachers now. You're on a road less traveled. We wish we had more time to learn from Matt. We had to learn from his friends and contemporaries. So listening is a great thing. And bottom line is every experience is individual. It all depends on family background, environment, your existing family, and your loved one who's inspired you to do this work, right? I've talked to lots of people who are like, I love that my folks are deeply involved, but maybe a little less would be good. I don't know that they really mean that, but listening really it's a tool. It's a really important tool to listen, but to remember also that your voice is the most powerful tool you have, and sharing your stories with family and friends to normalize what other people just refuse to do.
And you have to also understand, if you're going to do something like this, first you have to sit down and say to yourself and write down, what is your ultimate goal? And how do you plan to get there? And what are you going to do on the way to get there? And what's going to happen once you get there? Are you going to continue? Are you going to branch off? Be prepared for detours.
Yeah.
We had a big detour from 2016 to 2020 when all the cockroaches came out from underneath the rocks. And now we're back to trying to, use the rocks to smash them and put them back underneath the rocks. So that was a major detour for us.
Yeah.
Because prior to that, as Judy talks about, these kids, everything they wanted, they got, straight and gay. They were used to seeing kids holding hands, same sex. They were used to seeing same-sex people being married, and suddenly it changed. And now that's the detour. What do you do to get up on your feet and start over again? So they have to be prepared.
Yeah.
It's a process. The whole thing is a process. It doesn't happen overnight.
No. And actually, I'm glad that you mentioned detour, Dennis. I think that is such a perfect way to get into the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which was, Judy, you mentioned right in the beginning, one of the biggest focuses of the work that you were doing was on hate crimes and getting federal hate crimes legislation passed. And that did finally get passed in 2009. But there have been some serious detours. The past few years have been difficult. We are in a situation where we are seeing a historic number of anti-LGBTQ pieces of legislation being introduced and passing. It's not just the unpleasantness of the introduction. They're actually going into effect. So as people who have been in this a while, and as people who clearly chose to stay in this longer than originally planned, Did you see this negative trend coming? Obviously, we can look to previous administration and see where a lot of that came from. But did you see any of this coming? And what do you think is behind what we are currently seeing right now, this wave of frankly hate?
Well, we saw it coming, but what we didn't see was how fast it was going to take hold.
Yeah.
We absolutely knew that once the previous gentleman, no, let me backtrack. The previous person was elected, that it was just going to go south, because based on the campaign, we had an inkling of what was going to happen. What we didn't foresee was the quick turnaround of members of his party to suddenly realize that they had perhaps more power than they had before, that the previous president's backers were the people that we used to see in the early 90s, that passed all that horrible legislation in 2004, but then they got spanked in 2006, which I'm hoping is what we're going to see moving on. The country just isn't, that's not who we are. It just isn't who we are. But what's happening is the loudest voices are taking over the media, far-right media and mainstream media. We just can't seem to get away from the idea that if we talk about the awful things, we make more money. But there's so many really good things happening that if we just check ourselves and remember that we are the ones who are the majority, things will work, because we are. I know we are. But we're being shouted down, and that's just what happens. But in the end, it'll turn back around.
And one of the big things that I think is really hurting is something we didn't have when we lost Matt. You have social media now, which is an ugly, ugly thing in the wrong hands. And Judy calls them the underwear crowd, because they sit in the dark in their room in their underwear and they type these nasty things, and then they're out there forever. And these young kids, they're trying to find themselves already, and you start seeing that coming about and people reading it. And no wonder we have such a high suicide rate among young people, especially LGBTQ, and especially among the trans community in the LGBTQ plus. It's just horrific, and we shouldn't do it. They're our national treasure. We need to hold them and support them and encourage them, and not push them down and push them away.
But the one good thing from social media, one sentence, it allowed people to gather virtually during COVID when they couldn't do it in person.
Yes.
I just felt like for PFLAG, that is the answer to so many questions. Finding a chapter in your area where you don't have to drive and you can still have that community. I thought that was really an unintended good consequence.
I so agree with you. I was just talking to somebody the other day about this, and I said it was so exciting. I would look at my calendar and I could go to any PFLAG meeting I wanted, any place in the country during COVID. I mean, we're still doing so many of them online, but it was really exciting. And I kept thinking about even Pride celebrations that got taken online. People who had never been to a Pride celebration were able to log in and do it. And that, I think it's so hard for many people to imagine not having ever been to one, but that is a lifesaver. So I agree with you.
We even did a gala virtually in 2020. So it was really fun. It was really different, but it was really fun. It was fun.
And you don't have to wear painful high heels during an online gala, which I always appreciate.
For a minute.
Just for a minute, but you're sitting. So I actually want to talk about a little bit of that good news, because there have been some positive things that have happened. The article that we shared this week was about how Laramie has become a bit of an LGBTQ outpost, that there is so much more acceptance than there used to be. And, we hear about these places all the time, places like Laramie, places like Eureka Springs in Arkansas. And I think it tends to fly in the face of where people assume safe spaces are going to be found in certain communities. Why do you think this is happening? I mean, did you ever envision some places like Laramie becoming these well-known spaces for LGBTQ people? Why has it happened?
Okay. I think it's because number one, it's the only 4-year university in the state. Where you have universities, colleges, community colleges, you seem to have a little bit more of an open mind, because they're learning and they're realizing that their classmates, they're from all over the world and all different circumstances. So I think that helps a little bit.
I think that might be just a little bit overstated. We don't live in Laramie, we live in Casper, so I can't 100% say that. But we have friends that live in Laramie, and yes, the university is a thriving community for the LGBTQ plus folks. It is the one place they feel safe, but to feel safer, they go to Colorado.
Yeah.
But also Casper had its first Pride event festival weekend with a parade, and it was like no place to park, and people came from everywhere. It was a huge success, and we have a very thriving community in Casper now. But because we had two fearless, a couple, just organize it, just feel the courage and the support to actually put it together. Because I think people in Wyoming have been afraid because our legislators are not gay friendly. They are not. Their constituents might be, but our legislators are not. So that's you can still be fired for being gay at your job in Wyoming. There's no hate crime protection here still of any kind. They just send the message they're not friendly. But I would say Jackson is more friendly than Laramie or Casper, either one, but it's very much cosmopolitan. People from everywhere go to Jackson. Of course they do. But as residents, Casper and Laramie definitely it's better than it used to be. I mean, it's far better than it used to be, but I think it might be a little overstated to call it a haven.
Even last night in the city council, they had the first reading of an ordinance protecting the LGBTQ community from harassment and stuff. So there's some progress being made because they're starting to see and they're realizing this. There's a brain drain in Wyoming. The young people are leaving because they're scared. And so their friends are leaving because even though they may be straight and everything is good for them, they're leaving because they want to be with their friends. And then the families are leaving because they want to be with their kids.
So we'll see what happens at the second reading.
Yeah.
I think it is very interesting to monitor. And I think it's very interesting that that's being advanced at the same time that we are hearing in so many places protections are being removed. I mean, we did a show the other week where they were talking about how in Miami, the schools have recognized LGBT History Month for years, and this year they voted not to. And there was only one person. So, I mean, you have to look at these contrasts of really conservative places making some progress and typically liberal places that are actually really struggling. And I think it shows how complicated where we have found ourselves have to be. I was going through the Matthew Shepard Foundation website when I was getting ready for today's show. And one of the things that made me really smile was the number of productions of books, of poetry, of all of the media that has been created around your son. How does it feel to see this legacy that has developed? That, I mean, there are now people who weren't even alive when Matt was around, who know his name, know his story, know what he means, know what you've done. Where does that feel? What does that feel like at this point?
I think one of the things we were most concerned about was not that people would forget Matt, but they would forget the environment at that time, how really scary it was. And all of these things, the book of poetry in particular, October Morning, by Leslie Newman, who also wrote There Has Two Mommies, I just want to throw that out there, creates this empathy for a young man who lost his life so needlessly. But it's the Laramie Project that continues to remind people, because it's still one of the most produced plays in the country, internationally, actually. Yes. So those things keep the story of Matt alive. But what we don't want them to think is that this is only happening then, that it is still happening now, and not just to members of the LGBTQ plus community. Yes. If in the Laramie Project you took out Matt and his sexuality and introduced race or religion, it's exactly the same story. Yeah. So the fact that the Laramie Project is not even still just a play, but is being read in English classes now, and to reacquaint these young people with what was going on then, maybe it'll help them understand that this is not anywhere near being a permanent situation, and there's still so much work to be done, and it's going to be up to them to carry it on.
Wow. It's interesting, Judy, as you said, that you don't know if people understood what it was like at that time. And I had this moment where for a second I remembered it, and it hurts to even think about it. It hurts to think about how different it was. It also frightens me to think about all of these indications that I'm seeing in front of me that show things looking a little bit like they were. And that
Very
is
very much. I remember in the early 90s, it was the televangelists were like,
yes.
they were our worst enemy. And has that changed? I don't think
No.
so. I think it's gotten bigger. So they have weight again.
But Judy talked about when she first started speaking while I was in Saudi, going around to college and universities, all she saw whether they're straight or gay, because perception was a big part of it too. All she saw was fear in their eyes.
Yeah.
And now what she sees is indignation, because they're trying to take away something that everybody is supposed to have because they're Americans. How can you have two classes of Americans? You either get to have all the rights or everybody should have none of the rights. And so the young people, I think, are getting fed up. You see this even in Florida when they had a walkout of the high schools and colleges because of the Don't Say Gay issues.
They know what it was like when things were good, right?
They do.
Bad, and they don't want to go back. And the Dobbs decision has awakened us all to the fact that it can disappear and that we just cannot relax yet. So.
I agree with you completely. I think the language in that Dobbs decision, if it didn't chill people, and I always like to remind people, it wasn't until 2003 that all of the laws against criminalizing our lives were struck down. Yep. Our history is so close behind us, and it is so fragile. And I think this particular year has been a dark, great reminder of it. You know, we like to end every single show with giving people something to do because, you know, PFlaggers do love a good project. So we have a couple of minutes left. I'd love for both of you to just do a little call to action to parents out there who might be listening. What do you think they should be doing right now at these very, let's call them fragile times?
Registering voters. There's anything right now that is more important with only a month to go to the midterms that we get voters registered and get them to the polls. This is life. This is life or death. I am not kidding. This is life or death for our movement and so many other issues that we thought were settled. If we lose control of House and Senate or either, we're going to be paralyzed for the next 2 years. We just will be. There will be no legislation. It'll be gridlock and all bad news directed at all the marginalized communities.
Agree.
And that marginalized communities includes women.
Yes.
Yep.
So you need to keep that in mind. And what I have to say is that you need to participate.
Yep.
You need to, if you don't, especially women, I know they already work twice as hard for half the pay, but you still need to be out there and think about running for office. And it doesn't have to be a national office. It could be the PTA, but anything anything like that you are a member of, you make change because you're there. And if you don't want to run for office, attend the PTA meeting, the city council, find out what they're doing and saying, what they're trying to get passed, because it may be a call to arms to bring people in there like the whack jobs do now about book banning and stuff like that. They try to override a thing with their loud voices and put fear into everybody who comes there and says, I support something like Heather has two mommies. Oh, you're a pedophile. Yeah, right.
Yeah, we need to engage in our community for sure and see what's happening. This book banning thing is so scary.
Yeah,
It really is.
I call them pollies because they parrot everything somebody else is saying. They don't have a single thought for themselves. And their favorite saying, like a parrot, is Polly want a coup. Polly want a coup.
I think that this is such a perfect place to wrap up the conversation, though, because I mean, that is it. This is what it comes down to. Right now, there's no other bigger way to make your voice heard than actually getting out there and voting and making sure that other people are.
Please, and take people with you to vote.
Thank you.
And walk around and ask people, have you voted? Are you going to? Why not? Here's the issue. You're going to lose this country.
We're not going to. We're going to fight like hell because we have to. We've gotten too much right so far. And I think it is because of people like you and the work that you've done, I think, that have helped kick off so many of our advocacy lives. So Judy and Dennis, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for everything that you've done. We're getting so much love on social media right now because you're both here. We appreciate you. And you know that if you ever have anything to say, we are happy to open up this platform. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Jean Marie.
We're honored
Thanks,
so
everyone.
much.
Thank you.
And to the PFLAG parents, thank you for being out there. You are making the change because you're supporting your kids and you're showing it by example. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. We will see you soon. Stay safe. I'm all choked up. Please make sure that you are voting. Please make sure that you are registered. Please take somebody to vote with you. Please fight what is happening in your communities if it's negative. Look at that pflag.org/readwithlove to learn more about our program to fight book bans. And make sure that you are back with us again next week. We have another good show for you. We wrap up the same way every single week, reminding people to run fast, laugh hard, and most of all, be kind. So please be kind and please do the right thing and vote. My name is Jean Marie Navetta. I'll be back next week. If you need help before then, please visit us at pflag.org to find your local chapter. See you soon, everybody.